final speaker is Dr. Joel Parrott from the Oakland Zoo.
Thank you. I'd like to just say a few words about the issues that we're talking about, because I'm going to speak to you as a wildlife veterinarian. That's my specialty, and I'm also obviously the director of the zoo. But I'm here to speak really for the protection of animals and wildlife, because the real issue here is the aerial spraying, and is it safe? It's really as simple as that. We wouldn't, if they weren't taking this to this next level of actually trying to spray it over everyone's head, whether they wanted to be a part of this experiment or not, really it wouldn't be as offensive, because the damage on focal applications can be very limited. That damage, when it's spread out over everyone, is a far different situation. So the central question that you start with is it toxic or not? Is it toxic to wildlife? Is it toxic to your pets? And that really starts with, really, in this case, it's very easy, because you don't have to be scientists, and you don't have to even really understand the scientific studies. In this case, you can just read the label. If you read the label of the products that they used down in Santa Cruz, which was approved by the environmental review, was approved by the Department of Agriculture, in both cases, if you look at it in the concentrated form, the first thing that stands out is that, and I'll just read a couple of the comments from their own label of the product that they have used. And let me say ahead of that, if they change the product or they change the formulation, this same review should be done, because the same rules apply. In the first case is that the checkmate that they used was basically this is a quote, unregistered product, and it's for use only in the state of California, which brings to mind that if it's a safe product, why isn't it approved in other states throughout the United States? The second thing are the cautions they have throughout. Hazards to handlers and applicators, potentially harmful if swallowed, absorbed through the skin, or inhaled, causes moderate eye and skin irritation. Users should wash their hands before eating and drinking. Users should, what are they telling you there? What they're telling you there is that the product, and in this case they say in its concentrated form, is something to be very concerned with. And so, fine, you take it and then you apply that to its dilute form, how it's being applied in the community. But actually, when they do scientific studies, they have to do it on a concentrated form to determine whether or not something is going to be carcinogenic or whether or not. So what they do is, and it leads to the joke that, well, if you eat enough of anything, you're going to get sick. The truth is, that's exactly how they do it, because what we don't have when they do scientific studies is the long-term effect. They don't have the ability to say, what's its effect over 20 years? And in the case of this application, they're talking about a 3 to 5 year application process with this 12-month persistence in the environment product. If they change the product, again, if the rules still apply, the thing is, if it's going to be applied over, so what are the long-term effects? The answer is they don't know. They do know that what everyone's really been talking about is the short-term acute effect of this product. Does it cause a die-off or not? Does it lead to the micro-encapsulations form? Does it lead to some toxic thing? All they can do is say, well, we gave it today and there was a die-off tomorrow. The truth is that it's a longer-term issue than that. And that is, what's the effect over 10 and 20 years? Because if they're giving us all of these warnings, if it's on your skin, take off contaminated clothing, rinse your skin immediately. In the case of wildlife, in the case of the birds in the open aviaries at the Oakland Zoo, we can't take them out from being sprayed. If you have wildlife throughout the Bay Area, they are not going to be protected. They can't hide, stay indoors. If the the Department of Agriculture itself says, well, you ought to keep your dog in. You ought to stay in. If you all are afraid that day as you see the plane coming, to go out and go ahead and breathe the air, you're instinctively saying, this must be dangerous. And the fact is, in the case of their recommendation, they're acknowledging, well, it could be dangerous. Our studies don't prove it, but it could be dangerous. And so if you look at that, so with all the warnings that are carried on the very manufacturer's label, those are for the acute toxicities, but what they don't address are the chronic ones. They even include in here, which is amazing, that do not apply, you can apply it over riparian areas that are covered with plants, but don't do it over water. Do not apply directly to water. Don't even wash your containers out in water. Do not apply to areas where water is present or intertidal areas. When they spray overhead, it's going in the water. Is the concentration, so back to the concentrated form toxicity studies. Those studies tell you when you're going to have acute toxicity, but without knowing what it is, they cannot study whether you have, what's the effect of the more dilute form over a longer period of time. So what we're all being subjected to is a test. But one of the hard parts of it, it's a test that we won't know the answer to. Because when they do scientific studies, you like to have controls. You like to have a placebo, you like to have the drug. And in this case, you like to have the before, no other variables, and then the after. And then afterwards, 10 years from now, they can do a timing, and all of a sudden, something did crop up. Because those micro encapsulations, if they're in your lung, maybe they're large enough, they don't make it to your lung, but they're in your bronchial tube. And in the case of the birds at the zoo, the birds in the wild, they not only have lungs, they have air sacs. So if they wind up with this releasing a pheromone or any inert, whatever it is, over a gradual long period of time that persists in the environment, no one knows and no one can tell you, is it safe? And that's really the bottom line. See, and I think what is very disturbing about this whole thing is the whole issue of the die-off in Santa Cruz. Was it caused? Was it not caused? The burden of proof is being shifted from the supplier, the burden is to prove that for everybody it is safe before it is applied, to the community who's trying to prove that no, actually it's dangerous. And the burden should be on the supplier that it is proven safe. And effective is great, but it better be safe, because the difference here is not in topical application on the utility pole. I'm talking about the general distribution over the entire population. And for all of us, again, we'll probably stay indoors that night. They're going to send you a letter. Why should they even send you a letter? Why should they feel like they need to warn you other than they think, well, you have a phobia about it? The truth is, well, you know, it may be harmful. In which case, we want to let you know when it is, so you can stay in and keep your dog in, bring your dog, the dog dish in, and all that. It's telling you, just like it is on that label, that they are not really sure that it's safe, and that we're all about to go through the grand test to do that. So I think basically, in their testing, as we've gone through these different scientific tests, if you take the case of the pheromone, it sounds like it's a pretty benign thing, the pheromone, because it only really affects the moth. It doesn't even affect the bees, because it's specific to them. The truth is, it's a chemical. And it's a chemical just like any other chemical that is produced and distributed into the environment in a general sense, spread out across. And the problem with that is that you don't really know in scientific studies what the crossover is. In the case of the famous ones, DDT, that was an insecticide. Nobody had any idea that it would cause thinning of eggshells in the bald eagle. Where would that connection even come from? That connection came from retrospective epidemiological study of a mistake that occurred. And that is the reason that in veterinary medicine we have drugs that our target is, it's an antibiotic. We're targeting the bacteria that's causing the problem. We didn't mean to blow out the kidney, but we have very potent drugs that, while we're trying to get the offending organism, we kill the animal if we aren't careful. And it's just another example of, well, so what's the pheromone? The pheromone, you know, as long as it affects their sex life, as long as it doesn't affect mine, is not the way you can approach it, because it's actually a chemical that may be bonding to a protein that they have not studied yet, that you have no idea whether it's bonding to a cell membrane or whether it's bonding to proteins that are within the body. They're all basically unknown. So though it may sound innocuous because it's a pheromone just to mess up with the moth's breeding cycle, it's actually a chemical. And in the same case of all the inert agreements with ingredients, what they call inert, inert implies that it's not interacting with anything. It's not causing anything. But the fact is, if you look at and it was always covered up, it's just lumped in as inert ingredients. But as you saw from the slide, that there's actually a lot of problems that can occur with inert ingredients. And so when they do these tests, and I'll basically wrap up, but when they do these tests, they don't do it with, just imagine the daunting task, because again, we're talking about general spraying of ecologies as well as our communities and the animals that are at risk. When they do this general spraying, they have not studied it in all different birds. They don't know which bird species, and it varies species to species. It's not just man to mammal to bird. Within the bird class, there are all kinds of birds. Some birds, penguins, are very susceptible to malaria. Some birds are very susceptible to tuberculosis. Those in the field know fully well that it's not just their birds. And so have these products been tested in enough to know whether there are either short-term acute effects on specific bird species, like the DDT was to the peregrine falcon and bald eagle, or is it something that can also be effective as far as specific species on a long-term basis? So you've got the long-term and short-term, and none of this has been studied. So when they come to spray over Oakland, they're going to be spraying over the Oakland Zoo. We've got all our birds out that we can't shelter. That's really at the heart of what we have as a concern at the Oakland Zoo. But that's really not our only concern, because as advocates for wildlife, which is what we're here for, we've got an entire ecology of animals that are in the greater Bay Area that we just don't know what its effects are going to be. So, thank you.